Tensions have been brewing in the Zulu royal family between King Mngomezulu and traditional Prime Minister Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. This started when Prince Buthelezi issued a statement about the king's ill health, which was later refuted by the monarch's spokesperson. At the heart of the matter, it is reported that Buthelezi is not happy with the leadership changes to oversee the Ingonyama Trust. There are worries that this conflict may spill over into the political space. We're now joined by Professor Bheki Mngomezulu, a political analyst, to take a look at these dynamics. Thank you very much, Prof, for your time this afternoon. How would you characterize traditionally the relationship between the monarchy and the politics of KwaZulu-Natal, largely the country in present-day South Africa?
Thank you very much for having me, my sister. By and large, the relationship between KwaZulu and Natal's monarchy, that is the Zulu monarchy, and the politicians in the province is such that the king is above politics, which is why you have seen a number of politicians visiting the royal house at Nongoma, regardless of which political party they belong to. The understanding is that if you are a king, you are a king for everyone, regardless of their religious affiliation, political affiliation, or any of those identities that we normally refer to. So what has happened in the past is that the king has always tried to stay clear of politics. You would recall that during the transition from apartheid to the new political dispensation, the then king of the Zulu nation, that is the late King Goodwill Zwelithini, tried to stay away from politics. But then the problem was that until that time, all his affairs were controlled by then KwaZulu government. So there were people who were saying, therefore, that he should be closer to the IFP as opposed to the ANC. But then he maintained his identity as a king of everyone, which is why he was amenable to having meetings with leaders of the ANC. You would also recall that there was a scuffle between the ANC and the IFP on who was supposed to provide security to the king and the king's palaces, between the Zulu police, ZPs at the time, and then of course the South African police before they became the South African Police Service. So those were some of the dynamics. But as for the traditional leadership, in this case the king of the Zulu nation, he is aloof and he cannot be associated with any political party for him to be able to play his role. At the moment, the relationship seems not to be working well between him and the traditional prime minister for the reasons we have just stated, getting conflicting messages between Nkosi Mangosuthu Buthelezi in his capacity as the traditional prime minister of the Zulu nation, and then of course Prince Africa Zulu in his capacity as a spokesperson of the current or the reigning king, King Mngomezulu Zwelithini.
The tensions that you speak of between the king and Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, it is said that that is fueled by politicians. Is that something that we are seeing playing itself out here?
Absolutely. I think politicians are playing a very dirty game, which is a very dangerous one for that matter, in the sense that it might take us back to the politics of the early 1990s, where we saw people being killed from either side of the political divide, that is the ANC and the IFP. In this case, we've seen a letter, for instance, coming from one of the mayors saying that Prince Africa Zulu is a project of the ANC. Already, we are bringing royal issues in the sphere of politics, and that can't be right. But then, on the other side, we have also seen the ANC defending itself. One thing that is commendable is a decision by the ANC to deploy former Minister of Health, Dr. Zweli Mkhize, to try and find middle ground between both the king and, of course, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. That is something good in the sense that it is taking the province forward, and it is also trying to mend the walls, as it were. But my take is that if you have an ANC member trying to remedy the situation, you also need someone from the IFP side to make sure that there is a balancing act to avoid a situation whereby one party is seen to be preferred to the other. So I think that is the approach that they should take in order to make sure that they defuse the situation before it escalates.
You speak of a balancing act. The founder of the IFP, Bheki Mngomezulu, prides himself on being the nephew of the founder of the ANC, Pixlika Isaka Seme. What bearing does that have between the royal house and the ANC?
No, he's absolutely right. Historically, that is factually correct. Because his mom, that is the Princess Makoko, was coming from the royal house. So then when he makes that claim, it's not just an unfounded claim. So he's absolutely right. So his relations to the royal house comes in different ways. One, by virtue of birth, and then secondly, by virtue of him having been appointed as the traditional prime minister and having served more than one Zulu kings. So it means he's occupied this position for over 40 years. So then he's linked to the royal house in that context. But then I think other people only focus on his political identity as the founder and the longest serving leader of the IFP. So they can't distinguish between him as the IFP former leader and then him as the traditional prime minister. I think that is where lines are blurred. Whenever he addresses the nation, people try to link him to a particular faction when in fact at some point he's only exercising his role as the traditional prime minister of the Zulu nation.
What will then be the glue that will bring the parties together? Because with especially the recent report of the king falling ill, it was reported that he then went to Eswatini, and this is not the first time. Do eMaSwati have a role in perhaps mediating here, or is this purely for the Zulu royal household to handle?
I don't think that the Swati people would be the people who would come in the first instance. This is an internal matter. It's a royal house matter. It's a South African matter. So we have to handle this issue the best way we can as South Africans and as Zulus. Only when everything else fails can we then invite the Swati royal family, the Dlamini family, that is basically the uncle to the reigning king, and then say, can you please give us assistance? But we cannot just expect people from Eswatini to address our issues or to solve our problems. Let us handle our problems ourselves. Only if we fail can we then extend an invitation to them to come and lend a helping hand. By virtue of the fact that the king grew up there and he always visits that place because that is the place he knows better than KwaZulu-Natal, because that is where he grew up. And he studied there, and then after that he went to America and he came back there. So basically he knows Eswatini more than he knows KwaZulu-Natal, but it doesn't really take him away from the fact that he is currently the reigning king, and therefore he has to exercise all his responsibilities as the king. And then Mangosuthu Buthelezi has to exercise all his responsibilities as the traditional prime minister of the Zulu nation. And then, of course, Prince Africa has to exercise his role as the spokesperson for the royal house. In this case, or the spokesperson for the reigning king, King Misuzulu Ekazolithini.
Professor Bheki Mngomezulu is a political analyst. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon.